good contribution to the debates on global IR. Okay, so I also need to point out that this project was generously sponsored by the Korea Foundation. Also, we did get funding from the Faculty of Political Science, Thammasat University, and the Sanya Thammasat Institute at Thammasat University as well. Also, I'd like to thank Amitabh and Evelyn Go for writing the endorsement for this project. So before we actually go into the presentations, I would just like to say a bit about the book. I speak on behalf of us. I think I can do that. And I think we all feel a little discontent about the state of IR, which is, you know, pretty much Western dominant. By Western dominant, I mean in terms of like teaching based on Western experiences, theories and concepts, also based on Western experiences in history. So with that being said, I don't think we're necessarily against Western IR or IR that's based on Western experiences, and we don't necessarily seek to dichotomize Western, non-Western fault lines either. I think I need to make that clear. I think what we're asking for is a little more room for diversity from other experiences from other parts of the world that have been undervalued or overlooked in the study of IR. With that said, this project goes beyond criticizing Western IR. I think there's a lot of that, and I think we all acknowledge that you know, IR is a Western dominant discipline. So we go beyond that. And we also believe that the other parts of the world or the rest shouldn't be taken as mere testing grounds for existing mainstream IR theories. What we try to do is we try to look beyond that, and we look at our experiences and see what we conceptualize, what we can theorize from our experiences, our diverse experiences, especially in Southeast Asia and China. Also, I need to make clear that whatever we propose needs to and I think we all believe this, needs to travel beyond the Southeast Asian region. So this should have either useful implications for other regions or other smaller states, since we're made up of a region of smaller states. Some may say weaker. Some may think that there are a few middle powers in Southeast Asia, but regardless of what type of states we consist of, these concepts, theories that we think about, you know, based on our histories and contemporary experiences, should be able to travel and invite conversations or debates beyond the regional boundaries of Southeast Asia. So just to quickly talk about the contents of the book. I would, even though it's not formally presented in this way, I think they're kind of like two types of chapters in the book. So you've got chapters that are more based on national of the status of IR at the national level. So you've got country-based chapters. They include there's 7 altogether. So you've got we've got the original ASEAN 5 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, and we've got in contrast, we also have states such as Vietnam and Cambodia, who are on the other side of the Cold War during those times, and they have a different experience. So it was nice to compare and contrast these countries and these experiences. So these are country-based chapters. We also have Jeji's chapter. She focuses on China, the state of IR, and how the Chinese academia looks at Southeast Asia. And, you know, she compares and contrasts our experiences. So that's kind of like these chapters that are pretty much based on country-based experiences. Then we have the other chapters that are kind of like issue-based. So we've got Alan Chong's chapter. I don't want to say too much because Alan is here with us today, and so he'll probably give a better explanation than I can. But I'll just say that Alan's chapter does remind us that global IR is not only about contemporary discussions, but we can look at history to learn about local experiences or indigenous experiences. And the last chapter, Pinipan's chapter, he looks at hedging, but and he contributes to the debates on hedging from a standpoint from a weaker state, or so, you know, hedging, we kind of like think of it as a concept that states can pursue this strategy based on, you know, some level of capability. But with Myanmar, he looks at Myanmar, it's under extreme international and domestic pressure. What are these, you know, what are the opportunities for hedging? So he looks at that. So that's our collection of chapters, contributions. So I guess I'll stop there because I don't want to spoil too much. And I guess the presenters have a lot to say about their individual chapters. And then, of course, during Q&A, if anybody have any questions, I do encourage you to pose these questions. You can either put them in the chat box, or anybody who's watching this via Facebook Live, you can also post these in the comments under under this post. Okay, so without further ado, can I ask Alan to give your presentation and talk about your chapter? Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you very much, Neen. Let me share the screen. Okay, we should see the screen. I have only one slide, so I'll keep this very short. Now, the question of time in non-Western IR theory, as I'm reflecting upon it through Southeast Asia, should be treated as synonymous with the historical grounding of IR theorizing. And now, what inspired me to produce this piece? Actually, it was originated in a separate book project, potentially a journal project, until Neen contacted me, because this piece was still looking for a home. Now, what inspired me was the fact that when you read your mainstream IR theory from Western sources, there is this hidden layer, you know, which actually is not completely hidden. It's there in the fabric, the background of it, about history. And all of us who had to sit in for compulsory theory courses, especially if we had done our PhDs in a Western country, anywhere from the Commonwealth, the white Commonwealth, North America, Europe, would realize that the Western mainstream assumes that you understand that their story, the story of how Europe produced globalization, all right? It is that ethnocentric, okay? In this sense, I'm a little more edgy, right? And incorrect compared to what Neen just said. I have to criticize openly the West, because they assume that this story of globalization, the expansion of international society, came from the West. And to them, the experience in Southeast Asia of colonialism, imperialism, is part and parcel of this expansion of of Western norms of IR to the rest of the world. On top of that, they assume that we share the same narrative of World War One. Okay, World War One, as far as I'm concerned, was an exploitative imperialist war, and this is where I think those of our colleagues from Vietnam and Cambodia are spot on in decoupling from this narrative. All right, the rest of us, I think, we experience milder forms of colonialism, and maybe that's why we were willing to accept this narrative. Now, World War One was exploitive to a lot of Asians, and this is in the history, all right? Because people from here were brought all over to the Western Front in Europe to fight for the respective empires. Okay, I believe, as far as I know, the Germans did not do it because they did not have a large enough empire in Africa or Asia to import soldiers from the non-West. But the French and the British definitely did that. And you realize that whenever they celebrate this event, which took place a few days ago, called 11/11, commemoration of the end of World War One, you don't see Asians being part of that narrative, you see? And E.H. Carr, in his famous book, 20 Years Crisis, assumes that when he refers to that cataclysmic world war, everybody was on the same page, World War One. And you don't see Asia or any part of the non-West acknowledged as having been drawn into this thing through imperial linkages. It was not of the rest of the world's making. World War One, sadly to say, Lenin got it right. It was a war of Western imperialisms. Now, World War II, all of us in our respective countries remember it differently. I'm particularly sympathetic to the views expressed from the chapters, by the chapters from Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, because World War II was actually the turning of the page in our opening up to the world. So, we have to question these things. So in my chapter, realism comes in for a lot of stick because it assumes there's this big universal eternity of questions, that everyone, regardless of location on Earth, will share. And they assume World War One and World War II was a common experience. No, sorry. We remember it differently from where we are sitting and standing in Asia. And I'm sure, a Chinese point of view would also push back on this because World War One was where some imperialisms made further inroads into China. All right, so we can't remember it the way E.H. Carr, Hans Morgenthau, etc. remembered it. The same with World War II. Okay, World War II saw nationalist movements take on an armed, profile. And we were fighting as much against the Japanese as, we were preparing to fight the Western powers when they came back. So we cannot subscribe to the same narrative. All right, liberalism, again, is complicit in this kind of Western-centric history. I have a large section in the chapter where I argue that Western civilization as a global standard is only one contribution to the mainstream. All right, and in today's terms, we cannot accept this as the only intellectual resource for theorizing. Okay, and the more we assume that realism and liberalism are the only ways forward in defining regional security in Asia, we are doomed to repeat the last, centuries' domination of intellectual thought by the West. Constructivism, okay, I was shocked also in the course of producing this chapter to find out that Alexander Venn, whom I thought was more of a methodologist, a bit more of a neutral ground than the other two, in that major book of his, he openly declared he thinks that constructivism goes back, way back in the Western canon, and he's got nothing, absolutely nothing to say about the rest of the world as contributions to IR. Whereas if you look at some of the actual studies of how the past have influenced the way the new modern Asian states look at one another, we have been constructivists in practice before writing it out. So in this sense, I think Alexander Van's work is somewhat disingenuous on the historical front. And in this way, you see how I politicize history/time. It is someone else's reading of their history, and they map it onto the rest of the world. And this is what irritates me. Whenever I go to a convention like ISA, they assume that we're all familiar with this bedrock of history that's common to everybody. No, we are not. All right. So to democratize international relations as a discipline, we need to question these time history biases behind existing IR mainstream schools. Now, I'm quite sure I'm going to run out of time in the next 5 minutes or so. There's a lot in my chapter that I cannot summarize here. So I'll just give you a flavor. Now, first of all, in Asia, and this is so pertinent now that we know Trump 2.0 is coming to office on January 20th, 2025. We believe there's something called moral time and golden era, meaning politics and IR with it goes up and down. They're cyclical. I'm guessing that Trump 2.0 will represent a descent in moral time. All right. And if you look at a time-honored myth historical text like the Malay Annals, it's there in their telling of politics and IR. There is a time of glory when people behave ethically and they respect one another's cultural superiority and moral superiority. And there is a time when rulers indulge in worldly pleasures, indulge in anger, crusades that are built on pure anger. You know whom I'm referring to in the United States. This represents a dip, all right, in governance, in standards of governance, all right? And once these dips happen, you have to expect that things will go back up again. So this is how, I believe traditional Southeast Asian perspectives matter, because we do not believe that corruption remains, all right? And you look at some of the writing coming out of the pages of so-called mainstream journals like Foreign Affairs, international organization, a lot of those that still talk about the mainstream, meaning realism and liberalism, talk about the decline of the liberal international order, as if, that almost bipolar or unipolar moment from 1945 to perhaps the founding of the BRICS, is over. This is a very Western narrative of how time in IR takes place. And what about the return of religion? Okay, I believe that if you look at ancient Southeast Asia, we have never separated religion as morality from worldly politics. And why is it that, in the teaching of IR in most Western universities, they divorce the religious dimension? I mean, the reason why we've had this thing called, and it was coined in the West, the global war on terror, is because they've denied the fact that religion has always been there in IR. Okay, and I believe if you dig further, part of Thailand's foreign policy towards its neighbors, even during the Cold War, was partly based on religion. Okay, and Neen is probably more well-versed on this than I am. You look at the Thai-Lao relationship, for instance, there is this strong religious tone to it. Okay, and there are also other forms of religion that are traveling throughout Asia under the label of international relations. And Xi Jinping talks about Belt and Road by referring to this ancient religious past. Finally, if you look at the pure modern nationalist thought, purely modern nationalist thought of a large number of Southeast Asian states, including the Philippines and Indonesia, you realize that we have not experienced, in fact, we do not want to make reference to World Wars I and II. We believe that we are starting a new chapter. All right. I'm currently still scrutinizing Sukarno's political thought. Okay, I was in UIII last week, actually presenting a seminar on this, where I believe that we have not fully understood what he was saying and writing, and he was theorizing ahead of what his countrymen and women were prepared to conceive of, going forward. Because this is an experiment which we don't know the final destination of, being the new nation state. The same goes for Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and I believe also Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. We have not seen the full trajectory, and we cannot, subscribe to this thing that pronounces the end of the liberal order. Why must we talk about the liberal order all the time as the default global covering for everybody? No, we can talk about alternative local orders. And I think this is where ASEAN will still live to see its best days. So I conclude by saying that Southeast Asian international relations, both theory and practice, exist as blended modernities. There are going to be fusions of past and present rationalities. So in that regard, I think there's a lot more research to be done. It's just that we cannot be weighed down by the baggage of the mainstream IR theorists. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for such a wonderful presentation. So, as I mentioned earlier, Alan's chapter does remind us about the importance of history and how it can contribute to global IR. I guess, we're so focused about, when we think about IR, we immediately think about contemporary strategies, and concepts and all that, but you can find contributions by looking in the past, and some of that can be seen in present day concepts or behaviors, so on and so forth, as Alan pointed out. Okay, so next I would like to ask Wayu to give his presentation. So Wayu is co-wrote a chapter on the state of IR in Indonesia with Johannes William Santoso. So hang on, I'm supposed to share the slides, right? So bear with me 1 minute. Okay. So Wayu, when you're ready.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay, so you can give your presentation. Your slides are up now. Just
Yes,
tell me when to change it, because there are only 2 pages.
Yes, thank you very much, Nin. Could you please move to the second page of my PowerPoint presentation?
Okay, done.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming along to this webinar on the global international relations in Southeast Asia. I'm so glad to get the chance to present my co-authored chapter on Indonesia. It is very interesting to following Dr. Alan Chong's presentation on how ideas of international relations in the region develop as a mixture of modernities from the West and rationalities from the East. I continue to look more in national level. My primary argument is about the development and challenges to the advancement of global IR in Indonesia. Let me start by summarizing how IR has been developing as a discipline in the country. IR, if we look theoretically, there are 3 phases of conceptual development in IR in Indonesia. To make clear about the periods, let's use Cold War and post-Cold War. When during the Cold War, IR was taught as critical or historical realism, and it develops into mainstreams affected by or influenced by the IR mainstream theories, realism, liberalism, and others in 1970s and 80s. And then in the post-Cold War, when more varieties of IR, new perspectives were introduced, Indonesian scholars also learn how to advance their knowledge by using the new theoretical perspectives such as neoclassical realism and then constructivism, and also recently interpretive and reflexivist way of thinking has something to teach and research in Indonesia. However, I cannot claim that there is an Indonesian IR scholarship yet, because most Indonesian scholars do is to absorb or to assume foreign theories, and they apply to their studies and research, and draw on these methodologies. They make conceptual or empirical work and regarding Indonesian foreign policy, Indonesia and the outside world, and other topics in global politics. My research on this conceptual perspective of international relations encounters that recently or until now, constructivism and realism are the two most referred theories of international relations. In other work, my forthcoming publication, I discover from a large survey of recent publications made by Indonesian scholars, about 5,000 to 6,000 articles and books. I discovered that constructivism and realism continue to be the two most important, or the most or the dominant theoretical perspective. I wrote this in my co-authored chapter on Indonesia in this book, and I advanced the study, and still the same finding with the previous one, that these two theoretical perspectives are continually dominating, and positivism remains the most important methodological principle or guidance for Indonesian scholar to do research, and this tendency result in the continuing dominance of mainstream Western IR. However, during 2000s, many younger generation scholars from Indonesia returning home from their studies abroad, and they were more exposed to the latest theoretical development, particularly the interpretive and reflexive paradigms, so that they are more aware about the need of exploring local knowledge and bring them into the global academic stage. Again, I do not claim that Indonesians academia have arrived at a solid scholarship of Indonesian IR, but there is good effort to construct and contribute to what Nin has explained as beyond Western international relations, and there is no need to discard the mainstream theories, but presenting Indonesia as an alternative laboratory for expanding the studies of international relations. There are emerging scholarly works exploring, explaining Indonesian international activism using local pre-theories. In the book, we define pre-theories and theories as two steps which inspire scholars to develop their own perspective on international relations. And in Indonesia, we are still in the pre-theories phase to go for a solid international relation perspective. And some works about hedging, non-alignment, Asian, including some of my publications, indicate that there is a good will and good effort by local scholars to promote indigenous thinking and ways of thinking to contribute to global IR. To conclude my short presentation, let me underline what happened in today's IR discipline in Indonesia, which also affect the advancement of global IR. As we understand, liberalization of the universities happen everywhere, and it is an influential factor to how curriculum is designed. In Indonesian IR departments, if I can account about 70 to 80% subjects offered to students are now more practical oriented, and students, the Gen Z students, they do not like studying theories. They prefer doing units which can help them create their future career, and they do not like to work on philosophical research. Instead, they prefer to do something more oriented to current affairs, and it is a factor why theories do not develop very impressively in Indonesian IR departments. Also important is to note that the government, the Indonesian government, I think like many other governments in Asia, they do not support the development of theoretical or philosophical research and publications, because they tend to focus on more practical work, policy oriented research. And if we apply for government funding in Indonesia, it is much easier to get money from projects on Indonesian current affairs rather than exploring local knowledge or promoting agenda like global IR, and it is disadvantageous to the promotion and acceleration of work in local contributions to global IR, and accordingly, many Indonesian scholars prefer to do policy driven or theory driven instead of designing new theories or advancing interpretive and reflexive theories in international relations. There are, of course, many other factors which I can explore, but in this brief time, let me conclude by saying that okay, it is still a long way to go for an Indonesian IR scholarship, but there is a good sign and there is an emerging energy of the local scholars to work on this promising area of global IR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayu, for your presentation. I know it's a bit of a struggle because you had so much in your chapter, and I think it goes for everyone, all the contributors to this edited volume. We had so much in our chapter, so it's quite a challenge to fit everything in within a 10-minute presentation. But if I can just sum up, Indonesia is going through this transitional phase. This is because the younger generation are coming back and they're introducing theories, other theories, other than, you know, what has been traditionally been part of Indonesian IR, which are, you know, mainstream theories, most prominently constructivism and realism. So there is, because of that, there is some interest in global IR, some conceptual discussions, as you pointed out, but at the same time, there are also some obstacles. For example, students that don't have much interest in theory and would prefer more practical skills, which would enhance their kind of like attractiveness in the job market. So I guess that your Indonesia does share a lot of commonalities with Thailand. I guess I can talk about that in the Q&A. But for now, let me ask Gildo Benny to present his chapter. Let me just stop sharing the screen so you can share your slides. So while Gildo is sharing his slides, I'd just like to point out that Gildo co-wrote his chapter with Cheng Chui Quick and Zachary Rosley. Unfortunately, the other two authors cannot be with us today, but Gildo will be presenting their main points, but also be taking questions for this chapter. So whenever you're ready, Gildo, you can start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. My dear fellow colleagues. Yeah, I'm Gildo Benny, now serving in Binus University, Indonesia. By nationality, I'm Indonesian, but I spent about 1/3 of my lifetime in Malaysia, serving in Malaysian IR communities in Malaysian universities. So, the title of chapter that we wrote together is Linking Global Insight to Global IR, Locating Malaysian Context and Contributions. There are 5 points that actually reflected on the chapters. Yeah. The first point that I'd like to discuss is the main arguments, okay, and also the chapter focus methodology. Well, the chapter actually assesses the state of IR as an academic discipline in Malaysia, tracing trajectories of the discipline, including undergraduate and postgraduate programs offered by public and private universities in Malaysia. The chapter is written using mix between survey, document studies, and personal reflection of scholars' experience within Malaysian IR academia. It argues that Malaysian IR communities' dialogue with global IR is indirect and limited, but its contributions are thematically noteworthy and potentially significant. Then I'd like to move to the second section of the chapter, which is the evolution of IR discipline in Malaysia. The discipline of IR in Malaysia began in mid-1960s with the Department of History or Politics, firstly at the University of Malaya, followed by other public universities in Malaysia. However, it was not until early 1990s that Malaysian universities formally established IR departments or programs, with University of Malaya Faculty of Art and Social Science launching its International Studies program in 1992. As for now, both public and private universities in Malaysia offer IR courses at undergraduate, master, and PhD level. Firstly, because of the need of the country for the discipline, and also for the marketability of the program, especially for the private universities. Okay, the third point that I would like to discuss is the features of Malaysian IR landscape. Actually, my chapter discuss these three features. The first is a long and strong Western orientation in Malaysian IR landscape, with a dominance of English in learning and research. A few factors influence the Western orientation among IR scholarship in Malaysia. First, educational background of IR professor, which is we can say mostly, especially for the first, third, and second and third cohort, they were educated in Western countries. Secondly, is English used as the predominant language in teaching IR in Malaysia. Thirdly, prevalence of the Western IR theory paradigm, which is adopted by most Malaysian IR academia. And the fourth, because of the emphasis of publishing in index IR journal, mainly in ISI and Scopus, that we know that these journal outlets are mainly Western centric. Yeah. The second landscape in Malaysian IR is the loose and uneven academic policy nexus in the production and transmission of IR knowledge. In Malaysia, the production and transmission of IR knowledge involve the nexus between universities and government agencies. Malaysian IR community includes scholars, think tanks, government-linked think centers, and policy practitioners. Then the nexus involve exchanges, engagement, and entering in university, think tank, and the agency cycles. However, unlike the nexus in Singapore and Vietnam, which is more developed in the collaboration, the academic policy nexus interaction in Malaysia are actually very limited and unstructured. They rely mainly on ad hoc needs and personal ties. So there is not really structured in the nexus between academia and policymakers. The third features of Malaysian landscape is the theoretical propensity of Malaysian IR specialists. The use of theories and conceptual construct in Malaysian international relations is a contentious issue with conflicting views among scholars and policy practitioners. For many Malaysian practitioners, they dismiss theories and concepts as too abstract, too academic, and too American, while some see academic conceptualization effort as degrading and repugnant. However, there are groups of Malaysian scholars who value theories and believe that they are essential for understanding the complex international environment, especially this is among the academia. So despite the ambivalence towards theoretical approaches, surveys show that Malaysian IR scholars acknowledge the importance of introducing theoretical paradigms and methodological approach in their undergraduate programs, and they aim to balance theoretical construct with empirical events in their teaching. Okay, from that point, let's go to the fourth section of the chapter, which is the themes in Malaysian IR scholar and that reflect their contribution to global IR. As we know, global IR research program aims to promote pluralism and inclusivity in IR, including non-Western ideas and approaches. However, because of heavy influence by Western IR, Malaysia has been largely absent from the dialogue on global IR, with only few Malaysian scholars referring to global IR. Having said that, surveys show that a majority of Malaysian IR scholars support developing an IR theory based on indigenous cultures, worldview, and historical experiences. Literature review of Malaysian scholarship show that very few Malaysian scholars have explicitly not connected their work to global IR. But the contribution of these few Malaysian scholars have enriched, expanded, and exported new ideas fitting permanently to global IR. From this point, I would like to go to the final part of my talk, which is the three themes of Malaysian IR, Malaysian global IR scholarship output. That particularly relevant for the global IR programs, this paradigm. The first theme is the role of historical, additional, and other internal structures in shaping state external policy choices with a focus on historical and additional factors. Scholars have highlighted individual leaders' idiosyncrasies, identity politics, and domestic socio-political dynamics as key drivers of Malaysian external policies. Local insights, ideas, and interpretation of socio-political realities at foreign and international level offers insight for IR scholars. We can see several Malaysian IR scholars have produced conceptually elaborate writings with Asian flavor, enriching and expanding beyond Malaysia and Southeast Asia. We can see a few Malaysian IR scholars actually their work has expanded overseas, even in first world countries. Malaysian scholars and think tank and policy practitioners advocate for developing an indigenous framework based on local experiences and Southeast Asian aspiration, challenging the Western-centric orientation of IR. The second theme of Malaysian IR scholarship output is the Malaysian small state outlook on regionalism and multilateralism. Many Malaysian IR scholars have focused on ASEAN and related regional cooperation, with scholars conducting research on regionalism and multilateralism since 1990s. The research clusters include, firstly, evolution and effects on regional multilateralism, with scholars analyzing ASEAN's role in Malaysian foreign policy discourse and practices. Secondly, Southeast Asian and Asian outlook of multi-domain regional cooperation and international order, with focus on factors underlying Southeast Asian regionalism and related issues. Third is the Southeast Asian perspective on global institution and regional governance, with discussion highlighting local insight that challenge conventional Western viewpoints. And fourth, on the small states perspectives of small state agencies, aspirations and approach to regional affairs involving ASEAN-led mechanism. So we can see actually this study on ASEAN in Malaysia, among Malaysian scholarship, is the effort to challenge global IR. Okay, the final themes of the Malaysian IR scholarship output is Malaysian alignment choice as a weaker state. Malaysia has shifted from alliances to non-alignment in its external policy. The Malaysian strategic alignment choices have been a major issues in this area. The shift from Anglo-Malayan Defense Agreement or AMDA to FPDA, Five Power Defense Arrangement, and Malaysia's post-1971 alignment postures have been studied by earlier scholars. Some scholars also have focused on the concept of hedging as an instinctive behavior in international relations, offering analytical framework and conceptual parameters to study weaker states alignment decision. Yeah, with that point, I'm ending my talk. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Gildo. As I mentioned before, it's quite a challenge to fit everything in within 10 minutes. So just to quickly recap, I guess Malaysia and Indonesia do share a lot of commonalities. But with that being said, there's also commonalities with Thailand as well. And I also the Philippines. So on one hand, you still have the dominance of like mainstream IR. I think in Malaysia's case, it's the same as Thailand. The survey results showed that constructivism is the most dominant theory in Malaysian IR. Also, realism is still used, but also at the same time. And another thing is, I guess, policy, empirical orientated research is quite a big thing in Malaysia, as in Indonesia and Thailand. But on the other hand, you do see those contributions, as why you pointed out in the case of Indonesia. So with Malaysia, you have contributions to hedging that has attracted inter-regional discussions as well. So I have seen people outside the region engaging debates with Malaysian scholars in terms of hedging, smaller state strategies, so on and so forth. So you do see that glimmer of hope in the Malaysian academia. Okay, so we have one more presenter. This is JJ He from Fudan University in China. So I guess I'll hand the microphone over to you to give your presentation.
Well, thank you, Ning. Let me share my slides. I'm not sure if it will work.
Don't worry, if it doesn't work, I have your slides. Or do you want me to do it?
Yes, I guess.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ning, for putting together this book launch. And I truly learned a lot from reading our colleagues' works and writing this chapter. And unlike our colleagues, actually, my chapter mainly focuses on comparing the similarities and divergences in IR trends between the Chinese and the Southeast Asia scholarly communities. Well, it is important to explore the reasons behind this comparison. I'm personally actually more interested in discovering the opportunities for interactions between the communities, our two communities, and what more can be done in this regard. So please, next slide. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah. I would like to start my presentation by introducing the methodology of this chapter, because we know, like in China, we have a relatively big group of scholars working and studying in this discipline, like I guess more than like thousands of scholars in the field. So it is quite like not very possible to do people-based research. So my research actually is quite like article-based kind of method to do my survey. And actually in China, the IR scholarly journals can be classified into two main groups, policy-oriented and theory-based. And this study actually chose one of the most prominent journals in each group, the Journal of World Economics and Politics, which is a monthly journal, is quite theory-based, and the Journal of International Studies, which is a bi-monthly journal and policy-oriented. And I conducted a survey on the articles published there from the January 2018 to December 2022. And also the study was complemented by a survey of the panel topics discussed at the annual conventions of the Chinese Community of Political Science and International Studies, which is a significant and influential academic gathering in Chinese IR. You can think of it as a like Chinese version of ISA. and my research focuses on the years of 2019 to 2021. And it is important to note that approximately 70% of the participants at these conventions are emerging and junior scholars who have not attained their full professorship. And both surveys actually aim to investigate the research interests of IR scholars in China, particularly those at their early stages of careers, and how these interests compare to those of scholarly communities in Southeast Asia. So please, next slide. Thank you. In this chapter, I first provided a very brief overview of Chinese IR. And according to the survey results, realism remains popular among Chinese IR scholars, but liberalism has gained the most attention in leading Chinese IR journals in recent years, which is a very important difference from Southeast Asia. I will discuss it later. And although constructivism and global IR may attract the interest of some scholars, they generally have less influence compared to realism and liberalism in the field. It is also worth mentioning that the global IR study in China mainly focuses on constructing Chinese School of International Relations, which draw lessons from the history, practice, and classic works of China. Now, regarding the research method, while qualitative studies remain the mainstream, there is a steady growth in quantitative and formal modeling research. In terms of empirical studies in IR, a substantial number of articles are dedicated to Chinese foreign policy. This suggests that the contemporary Chinese IR studies remain closely aligned with the policy objectives, with scholars being encouraged and rewarded for providing theoretical and empirical justifications for Chinese foreign policy. Moreover, the regional and country studies have been a prominent subfield in Chinese IR, with the America, Northeast Asia, and Southeast Asia receiving the most scholarly attention. However, young scholars' interest in areas like Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East are also notable. In addition, global governance and international organization studies have gained popularity among Chinese scholars. Based on this overview, I actually compare the convergences and the divergences between Chinese and Southeast Asia's IR trend. Next slide, please. Our scholars in both our two regions share actually a common mission of decolonizing theoretical conceptions used to analyze their respective practices and indigenizing their national IR studies. Indeed, an increasing number of Chinese scholars are striving to enrich modern IR theories with traditional Chinese thoughts by employing contemporary methodologies. Like the names like Zhao Tingyang, Yan Xuetuan, Qin Yaqing are prominent examples among them. However, like in Southeast Asia, the Chinese IR community continues to rely heavily on the mainstream IR theories, and IR curricula have maintained a strong emphasis on Western IR perspectives. This is also a very important similarity, just as we discussed by our previous two presenters. Then how to balance these two goals? This is the question posed to IR scholars in both our two regions. Next slide, please. But despite all these similarities, there are also significant divergences between IR scholarly communities in China and Southeast Asia. While IR communities in Southeast Asia focus on exploring how small and middle powers can navigate between great powers, Chinese scholars devote more energy to contemplating the implications of China's growing power for both China and the global landscape. Specifically, unlike in Southeast Asia, where constructivism have gained prominence within academic communities, Chinese IR scholars continue to maintain a sustained interest in new liberal institutionalism, as just discussed. This actually reflects China's practical need to assert its regional and global status. Re-emerging as a great power in the past decades, China has come to realize that the existing international institutions created by the Western powers after World War II no longer adequately reflect its values and priorities, and therefore it needs to lead the reform of the global governance system. This created a new urge for the Chinese IR academics to study how international organizations work and what global governance can mean against the current international background. Another noteworthy trend in the Chinese AI studies is the growing interest among scholars in regional and country studies, often referred to as the area studies in the West. This development stands in contrast to the Southeast Asia AI communities, where this field is rarely explored. While the emphasis on regional and country studies is academic in substance, its goal is nevertheless very policy-oriented in support of China's overseas engagement, especially like the initiative of like BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Next slide, please. Despite the divergences between the AI communities in China and in Southeast Asia, there are actually opportunities for exchange with and learning from each other. Chinese scholars have displayed great interest in exploring the practices of Southeast Asian countries, particularly in the way they navigate the great power rivalry and maintain autonomy. For example, the conception of Hajin, developed and elaborated by Southeast Asian scholars in their study of local countries' response to great power competition, has been further explored and analyzed in the Chinese AI community. And this conception is even extended to explain the behaviors of great powers in many articles. And Chinese scholars are also very much inspired by the practical wisdom shown in the day-to-day interactions among Southeast Asian countries. Ting Ya-Qing and his students have verified the ontological importance of relationality through the power of ASEAN, and a lot of like outputs in this regard has been seen in Chinese Chinese written journal articles. And meanwhile, an increasing number of authors specializing in Southeast Asia, regardless of their ethnicity and residence, appear in the Chinese written academic works and are recognized by the Chinese AI community. Also important is the increasing institutionalized scholarly exchange now happening between China and Southeast Asian countries. However, there's still much more that can be done. At least I can think of 3 points that should be further strengthened in our between our two communities. First, there still exists a limited number of long-term visiting scholar programs between established academic institutions from the two regions. Most of current programs are short-term and encourage scholars to spend like several days and weeks in the other region, but there's quite not so much of the program that allows scholars to spend like half a year or year in the other region and to like deeply immerse with the other group of like scholars. Second, both sides should encourage language training programs to help academics overcome language barriers and facilitate better communication and mutual understanding. Though I noted that there's growing numbers of students in Southeast Asia are now learning Chinese, relatively fewer students and scholars in China can speak and read local languages of Southeast Asia. This is really the thing we need to like improve. Third, it is also crucial to provide financial support for joint research projects, academic events, and exchange programs to incentivize and facilitate academic collaboration between the AI communities from our two regions. And that's all for my presentation. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think this is particularly interesting because of the comparisons that you made between China and Southeast Asia. So there's some convergences, as you pointed out, but also there's divergences, which I thought was particularly interesting, especially in Southeast Asia. The dominant theory is like realism for China because of its foreign policy, its expanding reach. Neoliberalism is the preferred theory. Also, research themes diverge as well, obviously because of China's status as a rising power. Scholars are focused on that, where a region made up of smaller, weaker states. So obviously we're going to focus on that. So as you ended on a more positive note, there is some room for improvement and some room to kind of like advance this global IR agenda together. So hopefully we can take that up and put that into practice. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our 4 presentations. So many interesting points and that our authors brought up. So I'll just open it for Q&A. For anybody who has any questions, anyone who's on Zoom, you can use the chat box or you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Please introduce yourself as well and make clear who the question is for, or if you want to throw it out to the whole panel, that's possible as well. For those on Facebook Live, you can also put your comments under the post or under the clip that you're watching, and we can talk about your questions or comments. Okay, so they're not coming in yet. So I'll just abuse my position as the moderator and pose the first question. So I think a lot of us pointed out, not necessarily in the presentation, but actually in the book, that you know, there's the status of IR right now, and you know, us as well in particular, where we're kind of like in this state of dependency of IR, which is like Western IR, so dependent on like journals, on research themes. You know, they kind of like set the agenda and all that. Also, another thing is that teaching in Southeast Asia and in China is heavily focused on IR, Western IR. So, you know, we're kind of this is the way we've been socialized. How do we get out of that? What more can we do? I know JJ made some few suggestions, but I don't know whether you wanted to add anything more, or does the panel have any other suggestions? How do we get out of this state of dependency?
If I may say something, the way out is simply to publish more, but we have to break into these so-called Western dominated journals, because they're still being read by everybody, including in our region. So if you can get in, even if it's only an occasional piece into these Western journals, that's one way of changing things around. And I encourage all of you to try this new ISA journal that is overtly open to Global South and rest of the world perspectives. It's called Global Studies Quarterly, and I'm one of the editors on board. I don't edit the journal on a day-to-day basis, but I do know the 2 journal editors. Although they're from the West, they are sympathetic to Global South perspectives, and I often serve as their go-to reviewer on pieces relating to Southeast Asia. Okay, so this is just a little plug about what can be done. And there are also junctions, and I partly address the points made by Jia Jie and Hua Yu, as well as Guido, that if you want to find an angle for connecting with pre-existing marginal IR approaches. Okay, these are marginal, but they may not be for very long. Like civilizations. Okay, civilizations is not a school of IR per se, but it is a growing field, all right, that looks at culture and these so-called amorphous formations called civilizations as actors or strategic coalitions in IR. These will find good company with us, all right? And when some of you talk about decolonization studies or decolonizing stuff, IR, you know, and I've just been in touch with Farish in Farish Noor in Indonesia. You realize that you will find friends in the West that are willing to look at your research, champion your research, and so on. On top of that, also you can look for the postmodern approaches. Now, postmodern approaches, they have not fully reached out to us, but I recall with great encouragement that my first piece reading the Malay annals, the Sejarah Melayu, was rejected ironically by virtually all the Asian politics IR journals. And it found a home in the postmodern IR journal called Alternatives. All right, so I think we have friends out there. These approaches, they're not schools like postmodern civilization approaches. They are friendly towards us. So I think that's one way to go. Thank you.
Okay, did anyone want to add to, sorry, Wahyu, yeah?
Yes, I agree with Alan that what we need to do is to publish more in the Global South oriented journals, and I have an experience doing project funded by the Indonesian government several years ago. As the Ministry of Education wants to raise the ranks of Indonesian universities, and we were encouraged to publish in top 50 disciplinary journals, which means in IR I had to publish in European Journal of IR or World Politics and others. I tried once sending to these journals, and what they say is please engage more and more with the mainstream theories before you go to your own perspective, or they ask me it might be better for you to go to an Asian focus journals instead of us, which is more globally theoretical oriented. And I think Global Studies Quarterly is a good alternative beside others like Asian Security or more the Journal of Current Southeast Asian Affairs, which are more Asia focused and give more space for Asian scholars to express their insights. And still, for me, who build career in Indonesia and depending on the government funding, we need an alternative strategy. Like if we ask to write one article, we need to write one in mainstream perspective to get into the top rank IR journals, and another article, additional one, which is for our idealistic project. And this what I have done for a couple of years. It is of course adding the load of my work, but yeah, this is the consequence of academic idealism, I think.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. Did any of the two other authors want to add to this point?
Yes, I just want to add something. Like I actually mentioned in my chapter that the Chinese scholar Yan Xuetong actually is very critical to the development of global IR, and he seems to be not very satisfied by the current status of global IR. He argues that the global IR seems like more of a slogan or a rhetoric than something that with substances. I think his criticism actually reflects his very high expectation to what global IR can do, and this also gives us some suggestion on that, we should do more actually to first of all produce something that can resonate among ourselves, among the in global south, or like in the among the scholars that really recognize the idea. And then we can say like we really have produced some like so-called knowledge increment, then to promote the whole idea of global south. That being said, that well, it is true that the mainstream like Western-based IR journals may not like that much of those works that folks that try to promote the ideas of global south. We can do something like we can organize some like special issues, or we can put together some active volume to like have some more substances with global IR, with some not just discuss global IR is important. The ideas, the practices from the global south, from those like previously colonized world is important. But we produce something real, something with substances, and then we can say that global IR is the valuable idea rather than just a slogan. But there's still some, like from our side, there's still many that can be done. And we need to work hard from our side to produce something and to make the real contribution of the global IR.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to go beyond critiquing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gilda, you have something to say?
Yeah, I also want to echo what have been discussed by Ellen Wahyu Hejace. Yeah, because yeah, it's true that for Malaysian, for example, because of the commercialization of education, the drive to get market, okay, ranking, yeah. So we are urged to publish in top journal, which is actually very difficult for global IR, because these top journals we can see that they are populated by many many Western IR exponents. Yeah, okay. So yeah, and and our challenge is also among our colleges. Most of them are still subscribing to Western IR. Yeah. So maybe we need to collaborate more among us to promote global AR. Maybe we can continue this effort and then even strengthen this effort. Maybe we can form an association maybe of global AR scholars in Southeast Asia, that we can become the promoter of these theories, non-Western IR to our colleges. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, in Southeast Asia, we do lack these institutions, associations, not necessarily for global IR, but for academia in general. I mean, it's quite different from other regions. And I talk about this in the conclusion, where, you know, for example, the English school, they had a backing of, can't remember the exact name, but I think it was a committee for IR theory, something like that. Also, Latin America Dependency School, I know it's not traditionally an IR theory, but they had some institutional backing and all that. So that kind of helped. And we don't have those avenues in Southeast Asia, I'm afraid. Yeah. Okay. So we have one question in the chat box. Hang on, let me just. So let me. This is from Michael. So I guess you can all see it. So what is the meaning of indigenizing in Asian IR context, since Asian people are not homogeneous group? Okay, so does anybody want to take that question?
Yeah, I think Ellen has answered that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
because,
I didn't see that.
yeah, because actually we do not need to homogenize IR in Southeast Asia because it's provide another challenge for the IR theories, IR perspective, yeah. Because as for now, we have something a lot of homogeneity in Western IR, which is very different from in the application of IR in other regions, yeah. So we don't need to homogenize it, yeah. We need to even indigenizing it, meaning to make it more heterogeneous.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's the point about global IR. We're trying
Yeah.
to create diversity, and we're trying to
Yes, plurality.
show diversity, and that diversity can ignite further conversations and implications for, I don't know, theory development, conceptual development, or like revising theories or proposing new theories altogether. So definitely, I don't think yeah, I think we all agree that diversity is a good thing. Okay, so no, then no other questions at the moment. Let me just check with Facebook. Let me see. While we're waiting, I'll just pose another question. So a few of us do talk about this, but I think it's kind of like a interesting topic to kind of like touch on since we're talking about global IR. But in Southeast Asia, in comparative terms, we're not so big on theory. And a lot of us discuss, okay, we're more like empirical orientated. We prefer doing empirical orientated research and all that. But can any of you think of other reasons why are we in this state? Why Southeast Asians I wouldn't say dislike theory, but why isn't theory a big thing in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, because we can see that Southeast Asian IR communities are very young, and many of us maybe is not so strong in theory, and also the research that's got funded are usually current issues or policy research, policy-based research. Not so there is not many interest in actually theory. Even in fact, global AR is very alliant to many of our colleges, and also our policymakers, because our policymakers are mainly realist, which is the hardcore Western IR. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Does anybody want to add? Why? JJ, you're most welcome to talk about China's experiences as well. Yeah. Okay. So I guess a lot of from the Thai perspective, theory hasn't been given much value. I mean, IR theorists are not held in higher regard, and I think that's one problem. Also, classes, students, I guess that dictates the direction of research as well, even though that might be secondary, but it does have an effect. Yeah. Okay. There are no other questions in the chat room. I was just wondering if any of you had any questions perhaps for me or any other of the contributors to this volume, since actually since the book has been out, we haven't really engaged with one another. So I don't know whether anybody has any questions for one another or even for me. No? Okay. So I guess I'll end this session, this book launch, on that note. Thanks everybody for contributing. Thanks for the audience as well, for coming in, joining us, and thanks for the the question that we got as well. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. Even though I haven't mentioned it, I guess this is the first time since the book has been out. So thank you everybody for being such good contributors. I do hope we have another opportunity to work again on a separate project, probably on global IR. So with that, I would like to end this session and this book launch. Have a nice day, everybody. For people who are interested in other academic, other publications from Thammasat University, from the Political Science University, from the Faculty of Political Science, you can look at updates on our Facebook page, Dilak Chayanam Research Center. Okay, thank you everybody. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye
Have a nice
bye.
weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Have to stay in
Thank
touch.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
ขอบคุณค่ะ ขอบคุณอาจารย์มีนค่ะ